What's going on, everyone? Nick or Catalyst here. Welcome back to the channel. Today we have a video that is probably going to be the biggest challenge of my career so far. That's right, today we are going to attempt to find 5 things that Battlefield 5 does right. It doesn't do anything right, you moron! Yeah, well, although I'm inclined to agree with all you naysayers out there, the fact of the matter is that there are very few things on this list anyway that I could talk about that don't have a big asterisk put next to it in my notes. It's been almost a year since Battlefield 5 launched, and let's be honest, for the most part the game has been a steaming pile of cow poo on wheels. But regardless, I think it's important to take a look back at the first year of the game's life cycle and talk about both the good and bad as it pertains to the game by itself. Obviously, today we will be discussing the good, so what I've done is combine my personal opinion along with some of your guys' opinions to put together a list of 5 things that Battlefield 5 gets right. I know what you all are probably thinking, Catalyst, if there's a video on what Battlefield does right, is there going to be a video on what the game does wrong? And yes, of course there will be. That video will be coming out sometime next week, but as you all probably know, there is going to be a lot more to talk about in that video as opposed to this one, so I need a little bit more time to make that video. And just for the record, if anything on this list today seems like it's a stretch to you, it's probably because it is, because I had the hardest time trying to find something positive to say about the damn game. This is going to be a long video, so make sure that you get yourself some snacks, maybe a nice beverage, and kick your feet up while we discuss. If you end up enjoying the video, drop a like on it and consider subscribing to join the Cat Pack. Normally I don't say all of this until the end of the video, but this is going to be a long video as I said, so we are getting it all out of the way early. But without further ado, let's get into the list with some honorable mentions. If you were to ask me what the one solid consistency of the past few Battlefield titles has been, my first answer to you would be the soundtrack and the music. Having been heavily involved in the fine arts and music programs coming up through high school and even some in college, music is something that I have a soft spot for, and I can identify quality chord progression and memorable themes and separate them from filler content to round out the game sound. In the switch back to historical settings with Battlefield 1, DICE and EA elected to return to an orchestral soundtrack instead of the dubstep and heavy synth-based scores of Battlefield 3, 4, and Hardline. As it pertains to Battlefield 5, it is a game that is often criticized for having poor atmosphere, but one positive that comes out of having such a poor atmosphere is that the music has a greater tendency to shine, and it certainly does in Battlefield 5. Sure, maybe it doesn't have the same blood-pumping drums that was featured in the Ottoman Empire sections of Battlefield 1, but what Battlefield 5 does especially well with its score is invoke a different type of emotion from the player, one that triggers emotion of nationalistic pride, but also times a sense of loss and triumph. Does anything beat the Flight of the Pigeon from Battlefield 1? Perhaps not, it depends on which side of the fence your taste in music falls on, but at least in my opinion, EA and DICE have done another fantastic job at creating a memorable soundtrack that I'm not really getting tired of over 600 hours into the game later, and I will continue to not only play it in the background of this video, but I will enjoy it for many more hours to come. Remember at the start of the video when I said that there were going to be very few things on this list that were 100% positives for Battlefield 5, and a lot of the items on the list had asterisks next to their notes? Well, this is one of the things I was referring to. Overall, I think specializations are inferior to actually having attachments that affect weapon performance like in past titles in the series, but the fact of the matter is that if the game isn't set in modern times, or at least within the past, let's say 50 years or so, it's hard to make weapons dynamic for different playstyles. So with that being said, I'm writing off specializations as being one of the better things about Battlefield 5, especially in comparison to what we received with variants in Battlefield 1. One of the major issues with variants in Battlefield 1 was that they overall had minimal differences between them, and essentially they were the same weapon 3 times with very forgettable modifications, and the end result was that instead of weapons catering to a specific playstyle, weapons were marked as either good or bad. And while you can argue that specializations are more or less the same thing as variants but with a little more detail, the silver lining is that the specializations themselves don't serve the sole purpose of artificially increasing the weapon count in the game. The specializations in most cases do offer a chance to have different playstyles and do a good job at diversifying the type of engagements you'll encounter in the game, but I can't help but feel that the specialization system itself is very hollow and not very dynamic. I would have liked to see a bit of a sprawling tree of options instead of just 2 paths that were given, and maybe the option to intercross between the two more than there already are, but maybe that's asking for too much. This is the last of the honorable mentions, now onto the proper list. Now, admittedly, this is or was a console issue only, so for all of you folks in the audience on PC, you're going to have to sit this one out for a second. I think that Battlefield has this misleading stigma of being a man's game, one that is more difficult and realistic. At least that's always what the argument was in terms of the casual shooter, but the cold reality is that up until Battlefield 5, the franchise on console possessed some of the strongest aim assist in any game on the market. Far too often I see people tease Call of Duty players for how skillless their game is when it comes to gameplay, saying something along the lines of you just spam your aim assist to win gunfights, and while that's true, up until Battlefield 5 you did the exact same thing in Battlefield as well. Have you ever been playing an older Battlefield title and you and an enemy run up on each other and he absolutely decks you? And the death just feels off, like there's no way he could have been that accurate from his position. Well, in all prior Battlefields up until 5, there was something called auto-rotation aim assist, which combined itself with your standard FPS sticky aim assist slowdown, of which, as the name suggests, slows your crosshairs when you go over or around an enemy target. Auto-rotation aim assist allows you to snap to the center of your target's mass at certain ranges, and well, I'll just give you a demonstration of how it works via a video I made about auto-rotation aim assist over a year ago. Take it away, past me. Down backs away from that, keeps it very balanced. Now watch what happens when I turn auto rotation on. Not only is there a slight aim assist tug from the slowdown, but when you aim in, boom, it snaps right to the center of the player, and of course legit wasn't moving when we recorded this, but it would be ridiculously hard to coordinate it over party chat anyway. But if he began moving, the auto rotation would continue to lock onto him for a short time as he moved. And for all you skeptics out there that are possibly, saying that there is no way that this is legit, there's no way that this is actually happening, well, you can see as I finally find the sweet spot here, which is just over the enemy's backpack to where it triggers, when I ADS, I snap to the same exact spot. Every single time, the exact spot. And if I was doing this manually, then I wouldn't be hitting the exact same spot every time. I mean, auto rotation is just absolutely broken when you look at this, and I mean really broken. It's a nice helpful tool for new players, sure, but most people don't know it exists and will not turn it off because it helps you aim that much. So oh my goodness, listen to that mic and the 720p. But so as you can see by the video, auto rotation aim assist was really a very cheap aid to help newer or bad players, and it took a lot of gun skill out of the game. You didn't need to be accurate, you just needed to be in the general ballpark of the player you were shooting at, and the game would do the rest. It's exactly the same kind of aim assist that's in Call of Duty, and the fact that it was removed from the multiplayer in Battlefield 5 was something that I was and still am extremely happy about. It brought back a level of skill to gunfights in the game, and those players that abused auto-rotation aim assist in Battlefield 1 and past titles got a huge reality check when they tried to play this game and they suddenly weren't performing so well. Removing auto-rotation aim assist has made the game more difficult for players and is one of the few things that has actually widened the skill gap in comparison to Battlefield 1, which overall was an extremely easy game and had a very small skill gap. Granted, removing auto-rotation might have inadvertently contributed to the bipod meta, since the wave of players that came in during Battlefield 1 were now experiencing a game with significantly less aim assist and thus had a harder time getting kills, but that may just be a placebo effect as well. Either way, from where I'm standing, removing auto-rotation aim assist is clearly something that I've been advocating for a long time, and I'm glad that DICE finally removed it in Battlefield 5. I think when it comes to movement in Battlefield 5, you really need to look at where the franchise came from in order to appreciate where it is today when it comes to movement and physics. It's really a shame that so many players choose to bipod and restrict themselves in corners when the movement in Battlefield 5 is one of its best features. If you ever go back and play some of the older titles in the franchise, Bad Company 2, Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, and so on, and you play those titles directly after playing Battlefield 5, if you're like me, you will try to do some of the movement mechanics that are in Battlefield 5 in those games, and you're going to fail miserably. It really makes you appreciate how far the game has actually come. You go up to a wall in Battlefield 4, for example, that is maybe a little bit too tall for you to jump over. Too bad, you can't vault over that, you're going to have to go around. You can't jump in and out of windows, you can't barge through doors, you can't crouch run, you can't roll when falling from a decent height to take less fall damage, and no, you can't lie and move prone on your back. You also can't slide in any past games apart from Battlefield 1, and although DICE ended up nerfing the slide into the ground in Battlefield 1, and the slide isn't really anything too spectacular in Battlefield 5, it's still very much appreciated that it's there, and for the most part, it works. There are still some legacy bugs that can make the movement not work so well, but you truly don't know what you have until it's gone, and that definitely applies to the movement of Battlefield 5. This by far was the most mentioned aspect of the game that my subscribers and followers liked when I asked, and I tend to agree with you all, but it's only at number 4 because, well, it doesn't work all the time. Let's face it, grenade and explosive spam has always been a problem in the Battlefield franchise, and it reached its peak in Battlefield 1. There never failed to be a corner of the map or a situation during a game in which you were not at some point bombarded by a plethora of grenades and explosives. I do believe at one point Battlefield 1 had over 10 different types of explosives or grenades to use during a match, including gas grenades, frag grenades, incendiary grenades, light anti-tank grenades, AT grenades, limpet charges, AT rocket, I'm not done yet, dynamite, rifle grenades, crossbow launchers, smoke grenades, impact grenades, mortars, and they were all extremely easy to stock up on when there was an ammo crate nearby.
First aid! We are losing objective butter. First aid! There's some first aid!
Not only has DICE significantly reduced the amount of explosive gadgets in Battlefield 5, but they have really limited the amount of grenade spam overall in the game through the attrition system. Now, overall, my position on the attrition system has changed over time. We'll get to that in the next video, but one positive that I will point to when it comes to the attrition system is that it has nearly completely gotten rid of excessive explosive spam in Battlefield 5. No longer can players sit and send out grenade after grenade with no penalty. Once they're out, they either have to run to an ammo station or they have to find a box of ammo from a support player. Having minimal nade spam is something that I think is very overlooked in the context of the game overall, because if you were to include massive amounts of explosive spam in conjunction with what is already considered to be a game with a very annoying meta, I don't even want to begin to think about how unplayable Battlefield 5 could become. Just like with auto rotation in the number 5 spot, I consider Battlefield 5's revive system to be a much welcome and needed overhaul. Battlefield 1 had a huge problem when it came to revives. They were entirely too easy to achieve. All you had to do was pull out the syringe, walk over or run over to somebody, and pull on your right trigger or your left click, and boom, the down player was instantly returned to full health in the blink of an eye. If you got good enough and you really worked on your muscle memory, you could have done this action blindingly quick, and some players did. This resulted in many instances of revive trains during matches. The medic was so strong in competitive play for this reason that many leagues issued heavy class restrictions in order to reduce the amount of revive trains in the game. Call me a man of the classics, but I still think that the way the modern Battlefields handle revives has been the best out of all the iterations, but Battlefield 5's revive mechanics are a very close second and offer some much needed improvements. Now revives are a calculated decision, since it takes longer to perform and there is a higher time to kill. This eliminates the ease of the revive and actually forces players to use their brains when performing the action. In addition to that, as I'm sure you all know, your squad mates can also trigger their own slower revive, which is a nice addition to the game mechanics overall because it gives you more opportunities for a revive, but it doesn't completely negate the use of the meta class. All these opportunities to get revives and somehow I still get none. We slipped there. This is supposed to be a positive video. Right. Regardless, in conclusion, the new revive mechanics overall give the player more to do on the battlefield, more opportunities for revives, and it brings back the importance and minor difficulty of getting a revive off and not having it be an easy point and click. This shouldn't really come as a surprise to anybody, as this was also a very popular choice to come up when I asked the community, but the gunplay in Battlefield 5 is by far one of the more enjoyable parts of the game, when it's actually working. My biggest gripe with Battlefield 1's gunplay was the fact that there was very little skill involved with it. There was something called random bullet deviation, which randomized your bullet spread, sometimes leaving gunfights up to RNG, or random number generator, which is essentially luck. Gunplay now is back to normal in Battlefield 5, or mostly normal. DICE claimed that Battlefield 5 would have predictable recoil patterns, but that was a little bit of a white lie, as we've gotten recoil patterns, but they're only vertical and horizontal with a random number generator in which it either slays left or right, but it's more or less random in that sense. Regardless of that, the gunplay in Battlefield 5 can be fun and satisfying, especially with the latest installments of weapons that really seem to pack a punch and feel really solid. The animations are smooth and gunfights feel really nice and sound gritty as well. It's more of a return to the traditional roots of the franchise, which a lot of people, including myself, really happen to enjoy. It's the moment-to-moment combat that is the selling point of this game, and DICE has done a good job of creating gunplay that is entertaining and also challenging at times, as we discussed earlier with the removal of auto-rotation aim assist. It's honestly one of the main reasons I keep playing the game, because the gunplay is one of the things that Battlefield 5 does right, when it's working, but that's something we're going to tackle next week. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I know it was a longer one, but please, if you enjoyed it, leave me a like. It really helps out the channel a lot. It really helps me in the algorithm, especially since YouTube just likes to change that thing all the damn time. But please, again, if you enjoyed it, do drop a like, subscribe if you're new, turn on post notifications if you haven't already. Leave a comment down in the comment section. I'm very curious to know what you all think that DICE and Battlefield 5 got right. So please, let's start a discussion down there. I'm very interested in reading what you guys have to say. Thank you all so much for watching. My name is Nick or Catalyst, and I will see you all another time.
Without you, I remember myself, my name. Forgot about all you tried to change.